Welcome to the Migration Podcast, your guide for waterfowl hunting tactics, gear, and conservation. And now, your host, Brian Hallbly.
What is up, everyone? As Johnny M. said, I'm your host, Brian Hallbly. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to tune in to the Migration Waterfowl Podcast. Thank you so much. This episode is brought to you by the Duck Hole & Company, attracting feathers together. They are a full-service habitat company located in North Carolina. If you have questions about waterfowl habitat or need some work done on your property, contact them through any of their social media platforms at the Duck Hole Company. They can also fix you up with golden millet, also known as the duck buffet, and the best bang for your duck. This episode is also brought to you by CK Custom Calls, custom built in the USA from the great state of Texas. Handmade in a world of mass produced. Check out their calls on their Instagram and Facebook pages at CK Custom Calls. They showcase calls for sale there, and you can also contact them for a custom order. I just mailed a piece of Pennsylvania cherry wood to Caden at CK Custom Calls. I cut a tree down on my property here years ago. Had it cut into slabs. Made a couple of projects over the years out of that thing. Once I was talking to Caden about some different wood choices for some calls to get made and getting our partnership going. I came across that pile of cherry in my garage, and I thought, boy, that would be pretty sweet to have a couple of Pennsylvania cherry wood calls on my lanyard here. So I picked out a slab with some little bit of early wood, that lighter wood that's closer to the outside of the tree, and some dark wood, the heartwood, which is closer to the center of the tree. It's got a nice mix on there. I think they're going to be some really beautiful. Well, I know they're going to be. I mean, his calls, if you've looked them up, they're just gorgeous. So really looking forward to getting those made into a goose call and a duck call. So I just dropped those in the mail to Caden today, and excited to see what he makes for me. I apologize for my voice tonight. I'm still a little congested. Family and I brought a bug back from the Bahamas. My daughter wasn't feeling well at the end of the week on vacation. Me and my other daughter started feeling bad a couple days after we got home. And fortunately, my wife's avoided it. She's the smart one, staying away from us and keeping everything sanitized. But getting back on my feet this week, feeling a lot better, but still dealing with some of this head congestion. And see where this is going to go from here. Hopefully it'll just roll out and clear out the next couple days, and that'll be that. Went the whole winter and spring without even as much as a sniffle, and get sick in July, so go figure. But you know how that is. Get on the airplanes that are petri dishes, go to resorts with a lot of people. Who knows? But nothing major. We're surviving, getting through it one at a time. And like I said, hopefully that'll be it, and get this stuff out of my system for duck season. So hopefully have another healthy fall and winter and not have any interruptions there. I guess if that's got to find a silver lining, I guess that's the way to do it. Beautiful day here in Southwest Pennsylvania again. It's like 80 some degrees. So tonight I'm just enjoying a big cup of refreshing iced tea. I came across this tea on Amazon, of all places, a few years back. It's in K-cup form, which is pretty handy. It's an herbal loose leaf tea called Lush Berry by Higgins and Burke. I know, sounds like a sissy drink, but I got to tell you, super refreshing. It's hard to describe the flavor. It's like drinking fresh blackberries or something that you picked off the vine. I don't know if you guys like to walk through the woods and grab handfuls of blackberries, but kind of reminds me of that. You just put a little packet of stevia in there just to give it a little bit of a sweetness to it, but super refreshing. And I enjoy having these on occasion on a hot summer day. Of course, you got to drink it out of a big giant plastic or Tupperware, as it's known around these parts. Like the biggest cup that your dad could find to drink out of back in the day. That's what I'm sipping out of here. So hopefully you don't mind the sound effects, and hopefully this herbal tea will knock out whatever I got left in my system here. So yeah, I'd highly recommend this stuff. It's been a while since I ordered it because it came in a big box. So I've got plenty of them. And like I said, I only drink a few here and again. But here's the description. Let me see where to start here. With juicy berries paired with tart African hibiscus and sweet apple, Lush Berry is a tea that will brighten up your day. Serve hot or over ice. It makes commuting bearably delicious. Oh, that's clever. I totally screwed that up. Like I said, it's Higgins and Burke, Higgins, and Burke, Burke, loose leaf tea in the K-cup. And this is the Lush Berry. Yeah, I didn't make it sound any more manly after reading that, but it's pretty good. I highly recommend it if you like iced tea and you want to mix it up from the old regular tea. But yeah, enough about that. Let's see. One thing I wanted to mention, if you've been enjoying this show, please do me a favor, unless you're driving, of course. Take a moment to text one of your waterfowl hunting buddies and tell them about us. Tell them to give us a listen. Word of mouth sharing is one of the best and free ways that you can help me continue to bring you more content. And it doesn't just have to be one buddy. If you want to text more than one of your waterfowl hunting buddies that don't know about us, I would greatly appreciate that. It would really help us out. Also, another thing that I always mention at the end of the show, but just in case you sign off right after the guests do, I just wanted to remind everybody that I'll send you a free migration waterfowl decal to anyone who leaves a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Once you leave the review, send me an email or social media message with your name and address, and I'll get one sent out to you. And these aren't some cheap, crappy stickers either. These are pretty nice matte finish, thicker decals. It's the migration waterfowl emblem with the M and the Mallard flying. Be happy to send you one of those. We'd appreciate the 5-star review. If you could take time to click that 5th star and write a couple of sentences, that would go a long way to helping us out. Again, a free way that you could support us. Let's see here. I got my duck stamp, bought my Pennsylvania license. I'm all set to go for Pennsylvania. There's a veteran military hunt that opens the week before the regular opener. So September 28th, I'll be able to take advantage of that military veteran hunt, get a little jump start on some of the spots that might get a little more crowded on opening day, which is kind of cool. I still need to buy my Nebraska and Kansas licenses. I'll be picking those up over the next month or so. I think you can buy like a 2 or 3 day for both of those states, but I think for another $30 you can get for the whole season a non-resident license. So I'm just going to do that. One, I would do it anyway, just so there's more money going to the state game departments to help support their mission. And 2, might end up going back throughout the season. You never know what life can bring. So might have another opportunity to head back out there for big ducks after I do some early teal hunting, and we'll see how that goes. I also always get an Ohio non-resident license every year. I've got a deer hunting lease over there, so it isn't much for me to get any state waterfowl tags or anything over there. To be able to hunt another state that's only, 15, 20 minutes from my house. And, Ohio's got about the same reputation as Pennsylvania as far as waterfowl hunting goes. But actually, the guest we have on this week is from Ohio, and I think you're going to enjoy this episode a lot. But he does pretty well up there. He's got some inside information, so may end up hunting with him and a couple of my other buddies over there. So who knows? We'll see. I got my teal shells ordered from Heavy Shot. I've tested a lot of shells over the years. Heavy Shot have always consistently shot great out of my Beretta A400. This will be my first experience with heavy teal. I'm looking forward to hitting the pattern board when they get here. I'm not sponsored by them, but there are two things that they do well. Quality, quality products and support of our military and first responders. If you are either and like Heavy Shot products, I'd implore you to check out their military and first responder discount. They offer a huge 40% discount and free shipping when you spend $150, which doesn't take much when buying ammo. So, like I said, I'm not affiliated with them in any way. However, I do appreciate when a company supports our military and first responders. So I wanted to mention that to anybody out there. I use the app called Expert Voice. If you download that app, there's an application process to upload your military or first responder ID, and you'll be pleasantly surprised if you're not familiar with it. There's a ton of outdoor companies on there that offer big discounts. A lot of them, 30 and 40%, pretty significant. And in this day and age, you can save that kind of money on stuff you're buying anyway. That'll help you out with your bottom line every month. So I also picked up a Lucky Duck teal spinner decoy in preparation for my Nebraska and Kansas early teal hunts. Aiden from Cherry Creek Outdoors was kind enough to invite me to hunt with him while I'm in Nebraska, which is pretty awesome. I offered to pick up any gear he might need or that we may need for the hunt. And he said, just bring a few spinners. I already had a Mallard spinner, but figured I'd take advantage of an off-season sale for the teal spinner. Plus, that'll give me the option to run 2 spinners all season from now on, everywhere else I hunt. So it'd be pretty cool to have that. So that'll add another spinner, which will give me 2. And then I've got the 2 pulsators and a couple of other smaller motion decoys in the mix. So that with the jerk cord and the decoy spreading motion system I have. I can't even remember the name of it. I got to look it up. I've had it for so long. I don't think Motion Decoys was making them back then, but it could be. But won't have any trouble with motion in the spread this year for sure. So anyhow, I'm really fortunate to be hunting with Aiden in Nebraska, then headed over to Kansas to hunt with Elliot from Freelance Duck Hunting and the North American Waterfowler podcast. I'm hoping Elliot will discover something that we need for our hunts so I don't show up empty-handed there. But if you follow Elliot, he has everything needed for any duck hunt, and he's always prepared. But I'm super grateful and appreciative that both of these men have invited me to join them for some duck hunting in their home states. I'm already looking forward to the fellowship in God's creation with both of these gentlemen. Be sure to check out Migration Mondays on our YouTube channel. Starting to get some traction over there. I just got a message. I think it said the channel's had 10,000 views already, which is pretty cool. Just in the first couple of months. Those episodes are kind of a video companion to this audio podcast. This week I share a video clip from our episode with Aiden from Cherry Creek Outdoors about his approach to scouting. We really get into the details, and there's a lot of great info that we can use this time of year. Be sure to check that out and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the latest uploads. Also, I'll be recording all of my scouting and hunting this summer and fall and posting those videos to the YouTube channel. Speaking of recording, I also ordered a shot cam. For those of you not familiar with them, it's a camera system that attaches to the barrel of your shotgun. I'm sure if you've watched any waterfowl hunting on YouTube, you've seen guys using those. Pretty darn excited. It's the latest model. It's going to be in, I want to say it's 4K for sure. I'm not sure if it's higher than that. But anyway, it's definitely 4K and a little better options than the previous model. So I was going back and forth. I've got an old Canon handheld camera that's a higher end one. It's not a consumer model. It's a little upgrade over that, but it's old. It's probably 10 years old or so, but it still does a great job filming. And I've got a really old GoPro that needed upgraded too. So I was kind of kicking around the idea of upgrading my camcorder to a professional model. Trying to keep the budget low on that right now since I'm just getting everything started. Obviously want to see the response that the YouTube channel is going to have before I get too crazy. So I decided to use that budget to get the shot cam, which aren't cheap, and upgrade the GoPro. I think the older GoPro I have, I'm still going to be able to run. I'm going to run it off of a battery pack and the decoys maybe, so it won't be the end of the world if it doesn't work out or if something doesn't work on it. But I'm going to get an upgraded one to have on my hat. So that'll be the two upgrades with the budget for right now, the shot cam and the GoPro. Sorry to keep drinking in your ear, but trying to keep this congestion at bay. Keep my voice somewhat coherent. I think that's going to be about it. I'm looking forward to getting those couple of pieces of new gear. Going to get the new teal shells in, going to go pattern those. So it's going to be a busy couple of weeks here. It's crazy how fast it's going. In less than 2 months, I'll be on the road to Nebraska for the teal season there, and then Kansas shortly after that. So trying to keep up on everything, trying to make sure I got everything ready to go. I don't want to get too far behind, juggling a full-time job, trying to keep these podcasts coming weekly, and then keeping the YouTube channel updated and all the social media stuff. So just trying to keep it all flowing. It's been going pretty smooth. It's going to be interesting when hunting season starts to see how that dynamic changes. But I'm enjoying the heck out of it. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been no bother. So full steam ahead, and we'll just keep knocking it out. And speaking of that, I had a great conversation on today's episode. I think you'll enjoy it. I'm going to be talking with Eric Lance, owner of Lansource Consulting and the host of the HuntScience Podcast. Eric is from Ohio. He's a certified wildlife biologist. We chat about his education and professional journey. We talk about waterfowl ecology. We also discuss mallard nesting success. And then we get into hen house structures and their effect on the mallard population. It was an enjoyable chat with Eric, and I appreciated getting to know him better. It's episode 11 already. Time's flying. Let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of the Migration Waterfowl Podcast. I appreciate you all tuning in today. Got a special guest joining me today, Mr. Eric Lance. How are you tonight, Eric?
Hey, Brian, I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Recording this on Father's Day, so it's been a pretty hectic weekend, but I think you had your hands a little fuller than me.
Yeah, dads and ducks. There we go.
Yes,
I
sir.
told my wife, and she's like, I get it. She's like,
yeah, I think you had your hands fuller than me, though. It sounded like you had a tournament to run around for one of your kids.
Yeah, for sure. So both my daughters, I got two daughters. One's 15, going to be turned 16 here at the end of the year, and my other daughter's 12, going to be 13 here next month. They both play travel softball. They've been heavily involved in softball for years, and anybody out there who's listening who's been involved in travel sports like baseball or softball, they understand the summer commitment with that. So not a free weekend, and it makes it a challenge getting some of the conservation stuff done and my research done and those kind of things. So it's definitely, you're running around like a madman for a while. But yeah, so we're here to make it work. Unfortunately, we didn't win our tournament today, so a little bit of bad
that's
news.
A bummer.
But yeah, top it off, get to talk about ducks. So it's a win.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I had a little easier than you. I got to float around on a raft in my sister-in-law's pool and have a couple of cold beverages. So I guess I shouldn't say I'm really recovering the way you're recovering, but just having a coffee now and getting excited to talk some ducks with you.
Yeah, cool, man. I'm always ready to talk ducks. That's for sure.
Yeah, nice, man. Yeah, it sounds like you're not far behind me. My daughters are 22 and 19, so you'll be graduating into that next phase and writing the checks to the colleges like I am now.
Yeah, it's funny, like I got friends of mine that are around my age or a little bit younger, and they're just starting their family. And it's like, God bless you, man. I mean, there's trade-offs. My wife and I had our kids very young, in our early 20s, and I wouldn't trade it. Now I'm looking at it, looking like you said down the college door, and it's like we're going to be mid 40s when they're done, and it's our time after that. So it's going to be fun, getting to enjoy their next phase of their life while we're still young. So yeah. It's going to be fun, man. Still gives me anxiety. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be all right though. From what I know about you from some of our mutual friends and hearing about you, I think you'll be able to handle it all right.
Oh boy, it's not all true. Yeah.
Well, before we get too far down the road here, why don't you introduce yourself real quick and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, what you do for a living, and where you're from?
Yeah, for sure. I'll keep it short because I'm a man of many hats. A lot of people are always like, I don't know how you do everything that you do. But yeah, so my name's Eric Lance. I am a resident here in Northeast Ohio, lived here my entire life except for, stints in grad school. I am a wildlife biologist and a private consultant. So I work on the private consulting side. I own my own I own my own consulting company where I do a lot of environmental permitting and just a lot of your I don't want to say non-traditional, but what most people don't realize that's out there. I do a lot of private landowner work as far as habitat management, design, restoration, that kind of thing. But a large part of my business is on the environmental permitting side and the aspects that go into development projects, utility projects, those kind of things. So that's one side of it. The other side is, I'm an academic, so I teach at a big university here in Northeast Ohio. I'm an adjunct faculty up here, so I'm not full-time, but I do teach a course or two every semester. So they like to keep me right on that cusp of full-time faculty versus adjunct, which is fine, but I teach a lot of the professional development type classes, the upper division classes where students are getting ready to graduate with a degree in either environmental science, conservation, biology, natural resources, one of the degrees that are offered. And they're going to be working in the world of conservation, right? Whether it's for a state or federal agency or you're doing what I do in private consulting. So I bring a lot of the practicality, aspects of that type of world, to these students, getting them ready for the job force after that. And then outside of that, I'm pretty active in my local conservation groups, mainly with the Delta Waterfowl group that I work with here locally. Jeff over there is a great guy and someone I've been working with for a few years now, especially with the hen house nesting structures, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So floating around doing that stuff and getting ready to start a PhD here pretty soon. And beginning to start the field work process of the research and all that stuff. So I'm busy.
Yeah. I can imagine on top of everything else you're doing. Anybody I've known that's done any work for their PhD, that just adds a whole nother layer of craziness to it for sure. So good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you. But it's very time consuming, but the project, which I'm sure we'll talk about, the nice thing about it is we've already been doing aspects of it for a while, and we have the data that we can use. Obviously, a PhD dissertation and the research that goes behind it is very intense, but luckily, everything's local, so I don't have to go very far, and yeah, so it's the best of both worlds, type of thing, but definitely fortunate.
So did you grow up in that area? You kind of been around there your whole life?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up, born and raised in Northeast Ohio in Trumbull County, small town up here. And, I did not grow up a hunter. I did not grow up in a hunting family. I had a family member, not a close family member that was a hunter. Growing up though, I was always fascinated with wildlife. Ever since I can remember, going and waking up, Sunday mornings and watching, the Marty Stauffer, the old animal documentaries and stuff with my dad. The zoo book subscriptions, going to the library and just kind of getting as many books as I can and watching, nature shows. I just was always fascinated with wildlife. Never got into hunting though. I was a big athlete, and that consumed a lot of my time in my youth. But I did enjoy fishing. My grandparents lived in a campground that was run and owned by our church, and it was a couple 100-acre campground, very nice, big pond, a lot of woods to play in as a kid. We had woods to play in, so it just was always outside, getting muddy, catching frogs and turtles, and that kind of stuff. But like I said, never got into hunting. It really wasn't until probably first year, second year of college, undergrad, where I got into hunting. My roommate on the baseball team was a big hunter, and just kind of got me into it. It started off going out into the woods with him and helping him set up deer stands, and helping him for turkey or whatever he was going after, and just kind of got me into it. And then the more I got into my academics, for a biology degree, you start getting introduced to conservation and hunting and those kind of things. So it was a pretty standard, I would say, trajectory, from there. Once you get as anybody knows, once you start getting into that, I don't think the interest goes away. If you start getting interested in it, I think it's very few and far between that go, yeah, I don't want to do this. Type of thing. So got bit by the bug, with deer and everything like that. Waterfowl really didn't come into play until probably about 5 years ago. I really tried to avoid it as much as I could because I have a very addictive personality. I was already hunting a lot of deer and upland game birds. I've got 2 German short-haired pointers. I love hunting birds. And the waterfowl thing was just, as everybody listening knows, I'm like, I really don't want to do it. And it came down to a friend of mine who has some property by the river. And it was a Halloween night. We were having a little Halloween party with the kids and stuff. And us adults were, drinking some beers, just hanging out. And it just 2:00 in the morning, and it's duck season. And my buddy he's a big hunter too, and wanted to start getting into duck hunting. He looks at me and he's like, just quiet. He's like, "Hey, you want to go duck hunt in the morning?" And I'm like, "No." Like this, and I was like, I'm like, dang it, man. I'm like, we got to get up in like 2 hours. I'm like, I don't have anything, and he's like, I got you. Just bring a shotgun. We'll get it figured out. I got some decoys. And we went out there and shot our limit of mallards, and I was like, this is a problem. I think I went to the store after that the next day or something like that and spent like $600-700, on decoys and just stuff that I just like. My wife comes home, I'm unloading the truck. I think we've all been there, and you're like, she caught me. I'm like, okay, in my defense, I'm like, all these years I've been hunting, I've been able to slowly acquire all the things that I need. As like, I don't have anything for duck hunting other than shotgun. So I'm like, it is what it is, but here I am. And I haven't looked back. And I think anybody who probably hunts ducks a lot, I really do love hunting deer, and I love hunting, turkeys and upland game birds, but waterfowl, I think I would choose that. If you gave me an option, I think I would probably choose that. If a buddy called me, he's like, "Hey, I got a prime spot. We're getting if he's like, hey, we're getting a limit if we go, or you can go deer hunting in the morning." I'm like, yeah, I'm going duck hunting for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm finally honest with myself about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't take long. You could spend some money in a hurry, like you said. Run out there and drop $600 or $700, no problem. It's kind of funny. Both of us come from a lot of work in white-tailed deer and from deer hunting, and a lot of my friends, I'm sure it's the same in your circles too. They're like, "Man, I spent this on deer hunting and spent that." You just shake your head like, "Yeah, don't get into duck hunting, man. It'll really ramp that up." No question.
I mean, everything. You're sitting there like, all right, I need this layer of camo for this because I was sweating my face off out there that day, or I was freezing my face. I just whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I need just this pair of gloves is good for this. You're like, it's just a problem. Yeah.
So did the pursuit of your education kind of come before the hunting, or was it kind of hand in hand as you were going through that process?
Actually, no. I started off in veterinary medicine. That's what I wanted to do. Was pretty heavily involved in that for a few years. But, I had a professor that, and actually he's who I took over for. But I had a professor in college that really changed the trajectory on what I wanted to see. I wanted to be a wildlife veterinarian. If you could like say, hey, here's 10 years down the road, where are you? I'm like, I'm working out west for a park service, whether it's for the USDA or APHIS or something like that. And I'm a wildlife veterinarian doing, health monitoring, disease sampling, you name it, right? That's what I was going to be doing. And, I started taking his courses. He was a retired conservationist with the NRCS. He was a licensed forester, taught the wildlife resource courses, all the electives that I was interested in. And all of his stuff in his courses, like his forestry class, like we're out there marking timber, measuring timber, identifying timber, doing management plans. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I love this, and then we're out there in his wildlife class on the same piece of property at the university, and we're looking at early successional habitat, and we're doing vegetative sampling, and we're identifying, broadleaf, plants, and we're looking at crude proteins and talking about that. We're looking at, the structures of invasive species versus non-invasive species and the densities and how to control them and how to calibrate backpack sprayers. I mean, just all this stuff that we as land managers love and enjoy doing. This is the stuff that we were being taught. And I look back on it now, and not a lot of universities are doing that. He was a real diamond in the rough, if you will. And I just was talking to him. I mean, it's been 20 years, later, and I still talk with him. I just had a conversation with him last week. Still close with him, still talk with him. I've had him on my podcast. Unfortunately, the episode got damaged, so I got to redo it with him. But that's coming, and he's just a wealth of knowledge. He's one of those old school guys, those white hair guys that's just been around since the beginning, and he's just a wealth of knowledge. And he really steered me in the direction of conservation. He was honest about everything and where I needed to go as far as my path, and that's what I did. I was fortunate again to get in with a company that was an ecological company where I was doing bird surveys, fish shocking, soil sampling, wetland assessment, environmental permitting. Like I got a really good early look at all these different things that, led me to where I am today. So I did not anticipate going into the field that I did. And it's kind of funny that roommate that I mentioned earlier, big hunter. Back then, in school, I wanted to be the veterinarian, right? And his dream job was to work for Whitetails Unlimited and be a deer biologist. Now he's a financial advisor, and here I am working in the conservation world and pursuing a PhD and teaching, wildlife resource courses and the role swapped, so it's just funny how the pathway works. And, with all the experiences I've gained is something that I try to bring to the university where I teach these students. But yeah, to answer your question, no, I did not start off as that. I planned on, like I said, being a veterinarian and doing that for the rest of my life. And then, a little bit shortly after doing it, I just switched, just 180.
Yeah. I appreciate you going into the details of that. I'm always interested in people's stories and how they got where they're at. And it's amazing how just one or two little decisions can really turn things around. Like you said, your buddy's in the finance sector now. So
yeah,
you just never know how it's going to end up.
Yeah. I met my wife at the animal hospital, and, she was a registered, or she was a vet tech. And she's a nurse now. She works in behavioral clinical health. But back then, I really enjoyed it. I still to this day do. I still have friends of mine that I'm still actively involved and try to keep my education up because it does help, what I'm doing now. And, it's just one of those to where I just was honest with myself, like sitting in a clinic for 10 hours a day, deworming your chihuahua and vaccinating your little yipper dog. Like I just, it just wasn't, I was honest and said, I'm still working on the same goal. It's just, I'm doing it from a different aspect. I'm making sure the habitat is healthy and I'm making sure populations are healthy with healthy habitat, and that's going to drive healthy populations. That's kind of where, I saw everything going and that was the objective that I took. And I was like, I would rather be the one prescribing large scale ecological changes to your property or to make the species in the ecosystem surrounding it healthier that way than the way that I originally pursued, so wanting to be a wildlife veterinarian, I'm a wildlife biologist, so it's, similar pathways, but, obviously I just different objectives.
Sure. So that first hunt you went out with your friend locally there, what kind of birds were you guys seeing in that area?
Mallards. That's all we saw. Mallards and geese. That's all it was. It might not have been Halloween now think about it, but I mean, it was all mallards, there wasn't, there wasn't a whole diversity, as far as that goes. It's not a very big duck area to begin with, and honestly, it was just a timing thing because everything was frozen over and the river wasn't, and he happened to have a portion of the river that has a sandbar, a nice sandbar. So we can actually wade out there about chest high, not chest high, sorry, about hip high and actually put decoys out and actually get to the birds once you shot them. So he's got a really nice little stretch right there. Just everything kind of worked in our favor that day. We went out the next couple of days and, we saw a few mallards, but, we didn't get anything. It's been sporadic, here and there from there. But, the river system down in that location is not a very easy one to hunt. But yeah, the diversity is not there. We're close enough to other larger inland water bodies. That's where the diversity is, on those areas. So it's hard pulling those. It's hard pulling those different ducks other than mallards, off those bigger inland body water.
Yeah. So where did you go from there? Did you start hunting waterfowl more often, or kind of mixing it in with your deer hunting, or how'd that work out?
Definitely more often, I think like anything new, you get excited and it's kind of in that honeymoon phase. I think I'm still in that honeymoon phase 5 years later. But yeah, I got some, in that time, life introduces you to some new friends and things like that for acquaintances. And, my really good buddies now, one of my main hunting partners now. I mean, they've got a big waterfowl hunters, big goose hunters, have a lot of property, and I just got invited, and I've been hunting with them for the past 5 years. So a lot of geese hunting or goose hunting, sorry, and a lot of duck hunting in just various spots. So, going out with those guys during duck season, we go out a lot. We deer hunt a lot too. There's a lot of twofers, on that day, duck hunting in the morning, and I'm more of a evening deer hunter. My properties that I have for deer hunting, it's just better. And I would rather be duck hunting in the morning than deer hunting, type of thing. And all the 20 plus years I've been hunting deer, it's just the evening has always been a better pattern for me. And it actually is better because I can hunt ducks and the geese in the morning, and I can go hunt deer in the afternoon. So it's a perfect win-win for me. So I would say it's a pretty good mixed bag still, but definitely doing everything I can to find some more space, for ducks. I mean, you look at the access. I mean, it's no secret, access is rough, as far as that aspect. So, we're fortunate for the few properties that we have, and, trying not to shoot them out and trying to, maintain that healthy kind of dynamic between, seeing ducks a lot and, getting out there and kind of taking a break and, going after geese or deer, or just kind of letting them kind of, settle.
Yeah. Has most of your waterfowl hunting been confined to that northeast part of Ohio, or have you traveled much?
No, I haven't really traveled much with it. I mean, with my work schedule, I'm traveling a lot as it is. So it's all my friends and all the people that I hunt with and all of our, friends of friends and people that have property where we could hunt. It's all up here in Northeast Ohio. It's the North Zone. We don't have anything in the South. We've got some people we're gonna be talking to this year with some private land, options that, again, they don't waterfowl hunt. They're just big deer hunters. So, hopefully here this season we'll have something to come up, but primarily it's all Northern Zone.
Yeah. How'd your season end up going last year? Did you get to duck hunt much at all last year? Goose hunt?
Yeah. Last year, a lot of geese, a lot of mallards, wood ducks. That was pretty much my bag. I missed a pair of green wings. Just kind of came out of nowhere. We were on a hunt and just out. It's kind of a funny story. It's a softball complex, where our park is. And we were out there because the geese out there are a real bad problem. They've never been harassed, nothing for 30 years. I mean, there's geese out there everywhere. So the guy who runs property is like, hey, when goose season comes in, he's like, listen, man, if you and your buddies want to come out here and help us take care of someone's problem, I'm like, no problem. Yeah, that's consider it done. So we're out there in layout blinds and this is one of those, and you probably can understand this. You look at a body of water and you're like, this looks like there's going to be ducks here, because I've always been there in the afternoons for softball practice, so I never scouted it, and they were under kind of new management. And so I never had a reason to scout it. And, I'm like, oh, there's going to be ducks here. Like, I mean, it's just had shallow to deep and it was surrounded by woods on one side and there was, food around. I'm like, not really anything for nesting. It's all manicured lawn. And I'm like, this just looks ducky, if you will, right? But we're close to a big state, park body of water. So, we go out there and plenty of geese, but not a lot of ducks. And one morning, man, a pair of green wings came in, and still kind of being the new guy in our hunting group, we're all in the layout blinds, and I hear that infamous, kind of whistle of the duck wings. And I'm like, there's ducks somewhere, but we're trying to be still because there's geese coming too. So, I kind of like looking and I'm like, holy crap, there's a pair of green wings right there. And I'm kind of watching. I'm like, guys, there's ducks right there. There's some green wings. And they're like, what? And no one's really like paying attention. And it's one of those where I'm like, oh my God, I have a shot. I'm like, but I don't want to be the guy to just like say, take them, bust out early. And then everyone screws it up and then we lose it. The ducks just flew off. And I was like, what are we doing? It's like, they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, there's a pair of green wings right there. I'm like, why did we not shoot these things? And they're like, I didn't even see them. I'm like, oh my Lord, I said it 5 times, type of thing. So it was one of those. I was like, I'm not listening to you guys anymore. I'm like, you guys just cost me a mounted pair of green wings. I'm like, I'm done listening to you. I'm like, this is my spot. I'm older than all of you. I'm like, I'm pulling big brother rank here. Like I'm done with it. But anyway, yeah. So other than that, all mallards. So it's pretty much up here. I mean, most of the spots we see, a couple of times got to see some other species of ducks, but couldn't pull them, so other than that, late season, you'll see some blacks come in a little bit. Saw a couple of those, but most of the time, but you start getting later season, I'm usually doing banding and stuff like that and helping out other researchers and doing banding projects and telemetry projects and stuff like that. So I really get as much hunting as by December, I'm usually winding down my duck hunting, which the season's getting close to winding down anyway. So I'm usually, with the holiday and the kids and I'm usually winding down by then. So, yeah.
Yeah. Because Ohio season, I think usually wraps up the end of December. You really don't have too much going on January or beyond.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's the first week of January this year. I think of what it was. I can't remember, but I'm usually done by the end of December. I'm usually done.
Speaking of teal, have you ever taken advantage of that early teal season that Ohio has?
Yeah, I never see them.
Okay, that seems to be the same story I hear from everybody.
Yeah, I've got a buddy of mine that is a big waterfowler. I don't get to hunt with him that much. He grew up waterfowl hunting a lot, and he has kind of shifted over to geese. But he's taken me to a couple river shots, and I mean, it's you go out there and you're looking and you're hoping, you hear people, we see them, type of thing. But my short stint hunting, I haven't seen any blue wings. I mean, that's usually what you're going after. The green wings will stick around a little bit longer, which is obviously why we saw them when we did.
Sure.
But the blue wings, that north wind hits, they're gone.
Right.
They're out of there.
Yeah, we don't have a teal season in PA, anything early. So I was always curious about that, if I should even bother wasting my time over there, because it seems like they're gone pretty quick, and a lot of guys struggle to even find any.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely what I hear. I don't like I said, my experience is limited on the half a dozen or so properties that we've got that we hunt pretty regularly. Nothing. Yeah.
Okay.
And people that I've talked to that hunt other areas, it's kind of word of mouth thing. Now, of course, they'd be lying to you, but I don't see any photos getting posted about them holding up a blue wing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of goose, really taking over some of those suburban and semi, developed rural areas. They kind of remind me of white-tailed deer. It's like you could try to take as much habitat away from them as you can, and they're like, "Hold my beer. We'll just live in your backyard." It's crazy. We've got a lot of places like that.
Well, and it's land use changes. They're very good at adapting to the land use change. The urban landscape is very conducive for those species, right? I mean, whitetails obviously are these concentrate selectors that have the ability of finding food sources in all of these different areas, and whether it's residential landscaping, I mean, the list goes on for deer. But with waterfowl, especially geese, the predator impacts to those areas are not near as high, because you've got larger, urban landscapes, right? So I do a lot of work like in Cuyahoga County, for instance. And Cuyahoga County is the largest urbanized county in the state of Ohio. And you see geese everywhere, and it's these HOA developments, that have, water quality ponds, whether it's a detention, retention, constructed wetland system, whatever it is. And it's manicured lawns, and there's vegetation for them to eat. There's nesting because no one takes care of these ponds. So there's cattails, there's Phragmites, and these other things that they can nest in. No one's out there harassing them. No one's out there hunting them. And, I always say to people, wildlife, I don't care how intelligent a species is. They're all smart enough to understand where there's food, cover, water, space, and I'm not being hunted. That's the space they're going to occupy. It's just a no-brainer. The equation is simple. And for me, you absolutely have resident populations. I mean, anybody who bans geese, I mean, you could absolutely, ban geese in one area and find generations from that goose, in that same area. There's a large portion of them that still migrate. I mean, it's just the same thing with deer. Any highly urbanized species that's able to adapt like that, it's just a no-brainer. I mean, everything's trying to find food. They have it. How do I make a copy of myself and reproduce? They have it. And how do I not become food? Well, I stay here, where as long as I don't walk out in front of a big steel piece of machinery moving 40 miles an hour, I'm probably going to be okay for the most part, statistically speaking. When you start looking at it on a number value across the entire, urban population, the predation impacts or the accidental deaths, whatever the human wildlife conflict causes, isn't going to really significantly harm the population. Now, not in every area, obviously, but in most cases that's going to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just fascinating how a couple of species stand out and can tolerate that, and others just pick up and leave. It's always been fascinating to me.
Yeah. It's fascinating, but it's annoying at the same time.
Oh, absolutely.
It's I've been out there where I've been charged by a goose and you just grab it. People are like, calling the HOA. I got people, from the HOA or whatever come up and like, okay, you saw the thing come at me. Like, I'm not going to run from it. I'll just grab it, and the goose is like, what? He just kind of like just freaks out a little bit. It's like, hey, it wasn't planning this. I'm supposed to scare you. I'm like, I'm 6'4", 240. You got to do better than that, type of thing. So it's one of those where I get the human wildlife conflict in grad school was something that, was just kind of coming on, courses with that. So, it's something that I was introduced to that I pay more attention to, especially with the other work that I do in these high urbanized counties. And, I get involved with talking to some of these HOAs and these, developers and kind of how to mitigate these issues. So it's something I deal with pretty regular.
Yeah. So let's get into that. Tell me about where you went after you graduated and what led you to starting your own company.
Yeah. So I went to Virginia Tech for grad school. In this field, as a biologist, I mean, it's, especially about 15 years ago, you really needed to have a graduate degree to really kind of climb that ladder, if you will. And, just had an opportunity, right timing, get it done younger rather than later. So I did. And after that, I worked for some consulting companies for a while. And, it just got to the point to where I was climbing the ladder. And I think when you're young, you make the mistake of chasing money rather than jobs, type of thing in your career. So I think we're all guilty of that. And this was one of those instances where I was kind of mid-career and an opportunity came that I thought was a really good opportunity and it wasn't. And I find myself going, okay, what do I need to do? I can go find another job. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My dad just retired after owning a family business for 50 years, started when he was 18. So I've been around, businesses, family business for my whole life. I have my own martial art academy, which is where my podcast studio is, which is where I am right now. So I've run my own business.
Busy.
Yeah. So I run my own, I've run my own businesses before. And, when I was kind of trying to decide what I was going to do, because, with my background and experience, finding another job was not going to be hard. It just wasn't.
Right.
But I just kind of made a decision. I'm like, you know what? I said, this is the time. I'm going to see how it works, type of thing. Now, I think it's a bigger risk if you're going to start your own land management company and say, I'm going to do deer habitat. I'm going to do food plots, right? Everybody's doing it. But my background is I'm so involved in environmental permitting for all of these developers. I have all these contacts and these contractors that need help doing this kind of stuff that I had a Rolodex, if you will, of people that I could contact. That it's just a numbers game. Pretty quickly I had 5 people that were like, yeah, we'll hire you right now as a third party consultant. Okay, perfect. And that got me through the first couple of years. First couple of years were very, very good, from a business standpoint. I don't have any overhead. I have some obviously, but I don't have a building. I have my truck. I have my truck and a computer and my phone and I'm doing all this work, so it was just, again, right place, right time. And, that continues, it's just that type of industry is hard to find a lot of people that are, there's people around every corner that can do that kind of stuff. But when you start looking at the experience and the diversity and all the things that I'm able to do because of my interests and how addictive I get with my personality, I've just made myself, my dad always told me, I think growing up parents always kind of give you those 1 or 2 pieces of information and wisdom that you carry with, And one of the things my dad always told me was make yourself as marketable as possible. If there's a free training, take it. If there's a course, take it. If there's a 2-hour lecture on this, take it, type of thing. And that's just something that I did. Drives my wife nuts, but I'm like, hey, I'm driving. I'm going to go do this 3-hour seminar. I know, I'll go to these things. I'm like, yeah, I knew everything they were talking about, but it also refreshed, some things that,
sure.
Listen, the hard drive up here can only hold so much, man. Right. It's all the permits and everything that I deal with the EPA and the Army Corps and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and then all the habitat deer stuff. What do you plant when? This chemical mixture, this herbicide. Like, I delete enough information for what I need at the time, and then I'll just come back to it later. It's just one of those, so. Yeah, that's the long kind of run around as far as what started. It just was one of those. I made the decision. I had the opportunity that I didn't have to get a job right away. And I was like, I'm gonna just try this thing out, and see if I can get some of these guys to bite. And that kind of sounds bad to say that, but you get what I'm saying. Like,
for sure.
Just picking up the phone and calling, be like, hey man,
right.
I've been working with you for 5+ years at this old job. I know you guys have a hard time doing this yourself. Let me do it for you. So let me take it off your hands. Let me work with you as a third party, make your life easier. And that's all they need to hear, type of thing. So, yeah. So right now, like I said, I do a fair amount of private consulting, go out to people's properties like you're familiar with, but I do a lot of permitting aspects, and even with private landowners that are getting into Army Corps permitting and want to build, and they find out they have a wetland and they don't know what they have, and that kind of thing. So I still do quite a lot of work with wetlands and stuff like that on the private side. But with my business, a lot of it is the permitting from the development, utility, commercial, industrial, that kind of thing.
Okay. So recently, you've been spending a lot of time on some waterfowl projects. Kind of walk us through how that came about and what you're doing lately.
Yeah, for sure. So as you know, I have my own podcast and interviewing. So it's kind of a long story, but we're here. Right. That's what we're here to talk about. So
absolutely.
When I was pursuing my PhD, I originally was going to go to Ohio State to do it. I should say the Ohio State. You're from Pennsylvania, so I need to enunciate that. It's the Ohio State. And so I was talking to a professor down there who's getting ready to retire, and kind of spitballing some ideas. I said, listen, I want to do something. The deer thing's played out. Of course, there's research always going on with deer, but that's what everybody wants to do. Turkey research now is getting really big over the last few years in the industry. You look at guys like Marcus and what he's doing over there at the podcast. Over at the Wild Turkey Science Podcast, I know those guys. I've had them on my podcast. You look at Dr. Harper, Dr. Chamberlain, all those guys that are coming to the forefront because of the age of podcasting. I think it's getting more into the limelight, which it needs to. Turkey populations are an issue a lot of times with habitat, like a lot of stuff. But in kind of talking to that professor, spitting some ideas, and I was like year one hunting. I said I really would love to do something waterfowl related. And I'm working with these hen houses, and I'd like to kind of combine the two, maybe look at some. So he spits out this guy. He said, there's a guy that's doing this cool genetics research with these domestic game farm mallards and how they're hybridizing with wild mallards. He's like, I can't remember the guy's name. He's like, but he's interesting, right? So I'm like, yeah, that sounds really interesting. So I try to find this guy. I don't have a name. He's like, I think his name's Hunter or something like that. Well, I know this guy now pretty well, and it's not even close. It's like Dumb and Dumber, like Samsonite. I was that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, so I'm trying to find it. I'm working with, Dr. Smith at the university, who's one of my co-advisors, and we're trying to find this guy. And it's like a month or two. Like, I honestly just kind of gave up on it a little bit. I'm still trying to formulate what I want to do for research. I get up in the morning, I'm making my coffee, getting ready to go to work, and I just happen to open up Facebook, and I forget what podcast, Waterfowl podcast it was, and it says, mallards and genetics. I forget what the title was. And it was Dr. Phil Lavretsky. And I'm like, holy, I don't want to swear in your podcast, but like my wife comes downstairs and she's like, what happened? I'm like, this is like divine intervention. Like I've been looking for this guy forever. Can't find him. I don't know his name. I was way off. Not even starting with the same letter. And I said, here it is. Just some random scroll through Facebook, and I find this guy. So I listened to the podcast. I'm like, holy hell, I got to have him on my podcast. Like I was fanboying a little bit. I always make fun. I tell him now. I was like, I fanboyed a little bit when I fucked. I was super interested in his research. Still am. And so Dr. Phil, right? But Phil, you really, I'll give you off air. I'll get you hooked up with him. You really should have him on this podcast.
Okay.
So Phil is a wildlife geneticist. He's a PhD geneticist, works for University of Texas at El Paso. He's an internationally renowned geneticist, but his focus is waterfowl. Anything that has to do with mallards, he's got his hands in it for the most part. Especially when it comes to the genetics research, does a lot of stuff. He's in a big partnership right now with Ducks Unlimited, does a lot of stuff with wood ducks and hybrids. And I mean, you could go on and on and on talking to him about waterfowl and the stuff he's doing. So, we go down with that, and that's what kind of led that whole thing. So I get down and talk with him, and that's what led me down, going down the waterfowl rabbit hole, was because I just got hooked up with him, and his research is so interesting, and it played right into all the work that I'm doing with the hen house nesting structures. And yeah, just that's what brought it all. That's what brought it all to a head, from there, and that's what's continuing it today. Did that answer your question? I know I went off on a tangent there for a minute, but yeah,
for sure. But I want to back up. I want to talk about these hen house structures that you were working with. Let's get into that, kind of how that came about and what you're doing with those nowadays.
Yeah, so the Mallard hen house nesting structures. So we'll just call them hen house nesting structures or nesting structures. So Delta Waterfowl, as far as I have read, started that program in like 91. And the whole idea with these, they're the cylindrical tubes that everyone sees on a post of some type. And there are these cylindrical tubes with, some type of nesting material. People have played with different mixtures. And the whole idea is to provide suitable nesting habitat for nesting mallards in a time of decreasing nesting habitat. But also giving them the opportunity to nest away from predators to have a higher success rate, right? So that's the idea in a nutshell, with those. So, getting into waterfowl, I'm like, hey, I want to kind of look around my area and see who's doing what. I still am a member of Delta and a member of Ducks Unlimited. And at the time, our local Ducks Unlimited chapter wasn't around anymore, and the Delta was. So I was like, I'm going to call, these guys, do a lot of research, and I like Delta guys from what I've seen on the stuff they were doing at the time. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna reach out. Closest one, 20 minutes away, not bad. And I called Jeff. Jeff's an old white beard, duck hunter. And that group's not very big. It was only like 5-6 guys at the time. Like most of your local volunteer groups, most of them aren't very big. It sounds like a good idea to get involved until it comes time to do the work, type of thing. But Jeff is passionate about hen house nesting structures, man. I mean, he just, not a biologist, just a good old boy that hunts ducks, that has a big pond in his backyard and has a lot of mallards, started putting these things out. And he started seeing a lot of success and a lot of broods getting put on the water and a lot of birds surviving and nesting next year. So he was really getting involved with Matt Chenard, who he talked with a lot, who does a lot with the hen house nesting over at Delta. And yeah, man, for about 5 years or so, Jeff was heavily involved. And I think when I first met Jeff, I think he probably had about 10 structures of his own that he did, from everything from design build, to actually doing all the work and checking and that kind of thing. So when I finally reach out to Jeff, I want to get involved and help him. Sounds interesting. I like this, and started talking to him. And I was like, what kind of data are you seeing? What kind of success? He's like, yeah, I don't really have a whole lot. I jot some notes down. He's got a notebook he keeps. So he does keep some data. And as a biologist, I'm like, holy hell, man. I'm like, we got to fix this, type of thing, and that kind of is what led, well, not kind of, that's what led for me wanting to do, the work that we're doing. So right now, in Northeast Ohio, I think this year we put out a little over 50 tubes that we have out on the landscape. And yeah, we're installing those, we're monitoring those, maintaining those, checking those for eggs and counting the clutches and looking and collecting the shells and looking at soon going to be looking at genetics for my research, kind of in partnership with Phil, and kind of help him advance his studies, and also kind of look at mine from the conservation level and how these are being used on the landscape, and that, which I'm sure we can get into. And yeah, that's what we're doing now is we have them out, we're monitoring them and we're running it like a study. I'm putting together a GIS map to show an interactive location of where these things are. They're non-huntable areas, so you don't have to worry about people shooting ducks over them. And, so people, eventually we'll have a map published where people can access the map, whether it's on my website or whatever. And you can look at it and look at the data that we have. In year one, this is how the clutch size. This is how many hatches, how many survived. And then when we start adding the genetics into it, we can start looking at the hybridization between, the hen that was actually nesting there and start looking at those things and asking some questions. And hopefully chipping away at getting some answers, type of thing. So, that stuff is what we're going to be doing for my PhD. And yeah, so that's the work we're doing with it now, is just putting those on the landscape. We're getting more people involved, and there's other people in Ohio that are doing it, but in our neck of the woods, Northeast Ohio, we're the ones doing it, type of thing.
Yeah. So initial results, are you having pretty good success with them using it, like kind of compared to, everybody knows about wood duck nest boxes and how effective they are. Is it's something that's going to be comparable, or what are you thinking preliminarily?
So, yeah, it depends where you go. So and I say Jeff has, 5 years worth of data prior to me. We are seeing, which is when you talk to people in this space, that they're shocked, with it, because, Brendan up at the Wineas Point Marsh Conservancy up there in, by the lake here in Ohio, was talking to him about it when we were doing, banding projects up there, and they have a low utilization of those. We have a 60 to 70% utilization and success, for those where we are. Now, that's what the study is going to kind of look at. Part of the things we're looking at is water depth, location, how far from the shore, land use cover surrounding, that a lot of parameters. So hopefully over the years, and as people start putting these out and other volunteers, training them to collect this very easy data that we can pull together, be great to get other graduate students involved in the years to come and kind of help with that. But it still is infancy. But that's the idea. Why are ours so successful? That's the question. Because, talking with Phil, Dr. Lavretsky, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but I'm fairly confident at one time that we were talking about it, and where he is down in the Texas area on the western side of Texas, they don't get used very much. Now, talking about what he has found with the genetics and the hybridization of wild mallards in these game farms, it makes it. I can understand it, and again, we can talk about that. But you have some areas where they're not being utilized, some not as much, and others like ours where they're heavily utilized. So that's what has kind of led to my PhD research, is asking the question. We have this known problem with the hybridization of game farm mallards into wild populations. If you look at the Atlantic flyway, Phil is the foremost researcher on this subject. In the Atlantic flyway, based on his numbers, you have a 98% chance. If you shoot a mallard in the Atlantic flyway, you have a 98% chance that bird has a very significant portion of game farm mallard in that wild bird.
That's insane.
As you move west, okay, so as you move west into the Mississippi flyway in the Great Lakes region where we are, that number, I think Phil put a publication out in 2020, and I think he sampled 300 or 400 birds up at Wineas Point and some other areas. And I think the number, I don't have the numbers with me, but I think he found like a 40% chance that you had like 20% plus or 10% plus, something like that. I hope I'm not putting numbers in. I'm sure someone will fact check me on this, but fast forward to 2023. In February, he published a paper, and that went up to, I think, 60%. I mean, we'll say 50% conservatively, 55, whatever. You're talking about a 10 or 15% increase in less than in 3 years. That's significantly. That's raises the flags, right? Now, if you go west of the Mississippi, looking at his research, it's a 2% chance that you're going to harvest a wild mallard that has genetic game farm mallard in it of any significant proportion. So when he tells me, hey, I'm not seeing utilization in my area, well, maybe wild mallards don't really like that. But when you look at the prairie pothole region and the Delta scientists and things like that, they have this high prevalence use of these. I don't know the answer. I don't know how much they've surveyed the genetics. That's still the question. So we have a high utilization in those areas west of the Mississippi. East of the Mississippi, we have a high utilization, but we also have this high problem of a prevalence of this feral DNA in the wild population. Is there something significant there? I don't know. That's what I want to look at. I want to capture these birds that are nesting in our tubes and collect genetic samples, run it in the lab and see, Is this bird 5% feral? Is 100% wild? Is it 90% feral? And start looking at and providing some insight into those questions, because it's something that hasn't been researched, to my knowledge, and nothing that we can find in the peer-reviewed publications.
Yeah. So let's get into that a little bit deeper, into the mallard genetics and the hybridization in the Great Lakes region.
Yeah.
Kind of what is it, just them being exposed to so many domestic ducks or introduced mallards, or what's the situation with that?
Again, and for people that, again, this isn't my research, so a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about is stuff that Phil has laid out in research and stuff like that. So, I give him all the credit because he's awesome. But yeah, so you look back into the early to mid 20th century, 1900s. The greenhead is something that everybody wants to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And in portions of the northeastern Atlantic flyway, they weren't really there. It's black duck territory, so they wanted greenheads. Wild ducks don't do very well in captivity, for a lot of reasons. People want to compare them to turkeys, but there's behavioral and ecological changes that you can't compare a waterfowl species to an upland game bird. Obviously, an upland game bird is going to do better in a captive facility, right? They're just going to. That's neither here nor there. Now, what happened was the Europeans had been very successful in artificially selecting and breeding the way we do with dogs to make this domestic duck look like a mallard, fly like faster than a mallard, to make it more sporty. So if you look at a game farm mallard, and again, talking with Phil and seeing this in his lab and in his collection, if you look at a game farm mallard, a pure game farm mallard, they're smaller, they're flightier. There's a lot of physiological changes, but they're like little fighter jets, right? They're sportier bird. So you have a sportier bird that can be raised in captivity and then released, right? So you're putting greenheads on the landscape. Now, these are domestic ducks, and the survivability in the wild is very low. So, which was the idea. So you go into, and there's federal involvement. The federal government gets involved in this, and utilizing these releases and helping this until about the 60s. I think the 60s, the feds were like, hey, this is getting too much. We're going to stop doing this. But private releases still occur, and this is a complete non-believable number, but the number that always gets thrown around is on average about 250 or 300,000, of these game farm mallards get released every year. That is such a low number.
Yeah.
I don't know where they get that number, but I mean, I think in Ohio of these birds that get released, I mean, that number, you extrapolate that along the Atlantic flyway from north to south and our flyway, like that's such a wrong number. But anyway,
yeah.
So you take those birds, and of course, when you have mass numbers, you're going to have the offs that are going to survive, right? You can take birds. The thing with waterfowl is waterfowl have a really good what's called genetic plasticity, right? Their genomes can handle these changes and these hybridizations and mutations and produce, viable offspring, right? So if you take these, and you're talking about a bird that has, 20% game farm mallard in it, that bird's, for the most part, what we're seeing in those areas are surviving because we're seeing that genetic signature across the landscape. So it's surviving, right? It's not dying off. Natural selection isn't coming into play, right? Natural selection says if you can't survive the landscape, you're gonna die off. And if you look at the physiological changes of these birds, their legs are being the game farm mallard is more like a chicken, when you talk to Phil and looking at the studies. So you talk and what do we mean by that? Well, their legs are more built for being on land for longer durations, just like think of a pen that is raising these game farm mallards for a release. They're being fed chicken scratch and that type of feed, crumble being thrown out. So they're becoming more of a pecking type of bird, right? They still have the round bills, but what you're starting to see is that the lamella, the spaces, those little kind of like baleen on a whale a little bit. It's not the greatest example, but it gets the visual in your head. That space is widening, all right, which if they get into the wild, it drastically reduces their ability to filter feed like wild North American mallards do. Okay. Right? Everything just comes out. They can't filter the seeds and things like that they normally eat. That's one, right? The other interesting thing is that these birds do not put on any fat. When you harvest these birds, okay, for scientific collection, whether it's, game farm mallards and you go undercover and do a little sampling, right, as a client, and you look at these birds on the physiological scale, there's no fat, none, right? So you don't have the pantry. What is fat? Why did deer put on fat in the winter? They put it as energy, as a source of energy. If you're a migrating mallard and you want to get from the northern part of your territory to the southern part of your territory, what do you need? You need energy to get there. Well, these birds, when you put telemetry on them, Phil, looking at his research, he'll tell you that there's a Tennessee wall. They don't want to go any further south than this northern Tennessee wall. Why? It's interesting, right? Well, they don't have fat. We have massive wetland loss along the landscapes, right? So you don't have these refill sites where they can go over, right? They can't recharge at wetlands because we are draining wetlands for land use changes. We're losing wetlands because of development. I permit development projects all the time where wetlands get destroyed. Yeah. Right. And we just put them back somewhere else. So that doesn't do anything that this wetland served along a flyway. If it's a category 3, category 2, category 3s don't really get impact that much, but you get where I'm going with it.
Right.
So you start looking at these physiological changes, right? And this is increasing the adaptability of this bird to propagate those genetics on the landscape because of the high urbanization. This is kind of, and I've talked with Phil on this, my kind of hypothesis is, and it's something that taking telemetry data. Another good one is Ben Lukanen up at Michigan State. He might be done with his PhD right now, but he's looked at this issue, these urbanized mallards to kind of see why are they so successful. So he would be a good one to talk to as well. And I haven't read a whole lot of his research, so I don't really know it. But if you look at the Atlantic flyway, so my hypothesis is, or you look at our flyway. Right? Look at our flyway, the Great Lakes region. Well, you're telling me these birds can't get any from telemetry studies. I mean, it's telling us where the birds are. They're not going any further south than northern Tennessee. Okay. We've lost wetland landscape, so there's no refueling sites. But what do we have? If you look at Cuyahoga County, in the northern part of Ohio, it's a big band. And it's the highest populated urbanized county in the state of Ohio. Why that comes into play is because on the permitting side, when you start looking at like the NPDES permit, for your construction, your stormwater permitting, you have to have post-construction water quality a lot of times. What's that mean? Detention ponds, which are wet ponds, but not all the time. At some point, they're dry. You have retention ponds, which are always wet. And you have constructed wetlands. These are 3 primary ones besides subsurface retention that you see along the landscape. Well, if you're putting those on this linear band, east and west, what do you expect birds to do that can't go south? Where are they going to go? They're going to follow the resource. There's food, there's water, there's cover, and there's no predation. Not none, but you get where I'm going with it, right? Yeah. Again, they're going to adapt. And so the question is, well, how did the Great Lakes become such a hot spot, the new hot spot outside of the Atlantic flyway for this issue? Don't really know. But that's a hypothesis, right? Is this kind of lateral movement across the flyways. Now, I've seen posts of people on social media, and I haven't talked to Phil too much about this, but there has been a more common occurrence of birds in the southern portion of the Mississippi flyway, okay, that are birds that have been banded in the prairie pothole regions, places further west. Well, why? Well, you've got these birds that aren't able to come south from the northern part of our flyway because of this high hybridization, which is the hypothesis. Well, guess what? There's an ecological niche with available resources that need filled. These birds are moving in areas of decreasing resources and filling. That's the hypothesis, right? And you're seeing these birds that are being banded in other areas that, like, wait a minute, this bird wasn't even banned in our flyway. Now, birds move, flyways. It's not an uncommon thing. But, you start kind of adding all this stuff up. That's where the question comes in, looking at these henhouse nesting structures. It's not a popular opinion, but it's such a highly, used practice. If you take areas of hot zones like we are in the Great Lakes region, are we propagating the survivability of these birds that have higher degrees of genetic feral, DNA into the population by giving them nesting areas away from predation, out on the water, safe? Like, you know where I'm going?
Right.
So it's one of those. It's a question. I don't know. My hypothesis is probably not. I don't expect it to, but the math is math. When you start looking at the research that Phil is doing, as well as others, that he's partnering with, it's like these numbers are only going up. They're not going down.
Sure.
So to tell me that there's not an ecological implication, it just doesn't make. We're seeing it. You're seeing it, type of thing. And the other thing with the changes too is these ducks that have a higher degree, these game farm mallards are horrible nesters. They just, think of your farm duck, whether it's a khaki Campbell or a runner or whatever. They just lay eggs all over the place. They're not very good nesters, right? What do domestic ducks do? My sister's got a farm and she has domestic ducks. She's got khakis and Muscovies, which is a whole nother problem. But
right.
They have boxes they build, the nesting boxes. These birds are the domestic birds are used to nesting in these boxes. Well, if you're telling me that the wild population is having this significant increase in this domestic feral genetic signature, and you're showing these ecological traits, and I'm putting out an artificial structure for nesting, the question has to be asked: is it a higher prevalence? Are we contributing to the issue in these hot zone areas, or are we not? So that's where my research is going with it. So it's just kind of the next logical question.
Yeah. The thing that I couldn't believe, we talked to John Furman from the Duck.
Yeah, I saw your episode, and I didn't get a chance to listen to it.
Yeah, and he mentioned that there's zero regulation on these farm raised mallards. They could just be released, and that's insane to me. I just can't believe that they could do something like that with zero regulation.
Yeah, so I've got a preserve here in Ohio that I hunt pheasants at a lot. I use it as a training opportunity for my dogs, and I went down there and paid for some ducks, and sent the sample. I still have the samples, but I got to send them to Phil. But these are 100%, supposedly game farm mallards. So and when I opened them up and was looking at them and taking samples and stuff, no fat, right? Legs are different, bills are different, all this stuff, all these metrics that Phil has. I'm like, I'm seeing it like right here. Now these are domestic birds. These aren't wild birds. But, I told them what I was doing, because all my truck, I'm out there, I got my kit with me, and I'm taking samples and stuff. And they're like, guys, younger guys, good guys, I go down there a lot. I just was talking to them about it, and they were telling me, they're like, there's, other than a permit or something, like, I forget what they said, but there's no regulation. Yeah, there's none. And that's what I'm saying. I think, if I remember right, I want to say, they alone do like 20,000 ducks. And you're talking like one small, that 250,000, that's such a BS number. Like,
yeah.
I've talked with people at Fish and Wildlife that I know and that are waterfowl bird guys. And it made no sense, sorry. But they're like that. That's the number that gets published, but it's just, nobody believes that number. How do you on an unregulated system, like, how do you account for that number?
Yeah, it's hard to quantify.
There's no regulation to say, hey, ODNR, I want to put out into the landscape. I'm gonna raise 20,000 birds. Last year I released 15,000. There's no numbers, to my knowledge, that they can go to these facilities and say, and get an actual account for how many birds were released.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to not only follow along with your study, but to see how the long-term effects are from all these game-raised mallards and what they're going to have on the wild population.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird to me because I've talked with Phil about this, and I'm curious as someone new to this space. I've been a wildlife biologist for 15 plus years, but new to the wild or the waterfowl space. I'm still learning the academic and the research side. But it's one of those, like, I look online and try to find things, and you don't see it talked about that much. It's coming into the light more because of the work that Phil's doing and the partnerships he has with, like I said, Ben doing work in Michigan State, the Cohen Lab, Tennessee, they're doing a lot of work. And there's a lot of others, doing waterfowl work with mallards. And it's because of that you get these big conservation organizations like Ducks Unlimited, who partnered with Phil to look at this problem. Ducks Unlimited has a massive reach, so it's getting to the masses. So hopefully there's more research that goes on with this to help answer these questions because, again, you look at the numbers don't lie. I always tell people 2 + 2 is 4 no matter how bad you want it to be 5.
Sure.
You can ignore it all you want. But when you look at the Atlantic Flyway and the numbers that Phil has produced, I mean, he's the researcher. It comes from his mouth. I mean, get on wherever you consume your podcast. There's a lot of episodes of him talking about this, in more detail than what I'm going into. It's the numbers don't lie. That's what catches me. 98%, 60% where I live. Damn, man, the birds I've shot the past 5 years, what are those percentages that I didn't collect, and right, we're still in the infancy, of me trying to get permission at the university where I am to be able to run these samples. I've got a freezer full of samples, but it's one of those. I'm like, how is this not a bigger thing? And,
sure.
And, the hunting community, how is this something that, is not out there enough to where as hunters, we want answers and devil's advocate, and I've told my friends this, the core group, the guys that I hunt with. And I said, maybe guys, researchers like Phil and people that are talking about this and the very little, I don't even want to say influence that I have, but with my reason, the people that are looking this interested, maybe we're blowing it out of proportion. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe there's not going to be this large scale ecological issue, with it.
Yeah.
However, my other side of the coin is I don't ever want to get to the point here in my state of Ohio. I could not fathom 15, 20, 30 years from now having to hunt greenheads like we do pheasant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, who wants that? That's such a failure on the conservation side if that ever got to that point.
For sure.
And so I tell my buddies, and I'm like, listen, I don't mean this negatively. I said, but guys like you don't give a crap. You just don't, because we're going to go out there and we're going to see greenheads when we hunt, and we're going to shoot them. We're going to eat or harvest them. We're going to, hunt and have successful hunts. It's always, it's someone else's problem, type of thing, so it's like
a lot of apathy.
Yeah, it's all it is, and you look at the deer issue, right? You tell people the state's over managing the deer. Are they? How do you know? I said, because the state of Ohio conservatively is 96% private land. You want them to influence the deer population on 4% of what they can manage?
Yeah.
You have 200 acres. What do? Oh, you want the tax break, so you're just going to put it in monocrop agriculture or livestock pasture land that's low quality, type of thing. It's like, I don't want to hear it.
And those guys do a great job with the small resources they have. People have no idea what those organizations are facing, but
they have none. And they're the loudest voices.
They get a lot of crap. Right.
And they're the loudest comments on social media.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, hey, man, come out and put tubes out with us in the ice, busting ice, it's 8 degrees outside. Come on, we're gonna bust dice and put tubes in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just that simple. You just do it.
Right.
You think the land manager, I know you manage your property. It's 90 degrees out today. That sucks being on a tractor, in the heat, plowing, disking, planting. Like, it's a long, sweaty day, man.
Yeah.
Type of thing. But we love doing it.
Unless I'm at Al's place, he's got air conditioned cabs. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Al sold out. But it's one of those where it's like, I look at it. It just I like to be the guy in the corner of the room. Just kind of, especially I have a podcast too. Topics like this is what I hear people talking about. This is what I hear people complaining about.
Yeah,
it's comical to me. Like talking to these guys like. Tonkovich and these guys and his right hands that manage a deer population. Like, okay, did you submit a survey back to them?
Right.
Did you tell them, do you keep observation data on your phone that's with you on every hunt? If it's an iPhone, go to your notes.
Yeah.
How many deer did I see today? What were they? That takes 2 seconds. You're probably
you can't even.
You're probably scrolling on Facebook while you're sitting in the stand not paying attention anyway. So it's like, now I look at it from the perspective of a biologist, right? I'm only as good as the data that you give me. Whether it's a client that wants me to do a permit for them, I'm only as good as what you give me,
Right.
And it's, if you want a state agency to manage, did you go to an event that they had? There was a coyote, event for ODNR not too long ago. I think, like, don't quote me on this, but it was I think maybe like 12 people went. Like, yeah, but every time ODNR posts something on Facebook page, bam, man, there's 700 comments on there, and I can't wait to go in there and look at it. The hunting society, the hunting culture, it's gotta, I think in a lot of aspects it has, but a lot of aspects it hasn't. It's got to. We have to start putting our money where our mouth is, and people have to start stepping up a little bit. Otherwise, I get concerned about it. The hunting heritage, man.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people, look at pheasants in Ohio. And that's
sure.
It's like, I think Ohio released sub 20,000 pheasants. You guys released like 250,000.
Right.
I'm like, that's how you want to hunt birds?
Yeah.
The damage has been done with land use cover change, for upland game birds. It's a hard life for an upland game bird. Everything wants to eat it. Nesting habitat's gone, so the pockets that we do have it, you got to cherish it. The conservation effort, even if it's joining pheasants forever for $30 a year, like,
right.
Why wouldn't you do it? I used to do a lot with QDMA when it was QDMA. We had a local branch. We'd go to outdoor shows. I'm like, you hunt deer? They're like, yeah. I'm like, you be a member? They're like, nah. I'm like, why? Like, why?
Right.
The magazine itself is awesome magazine.
For sure. Yeah.
Like, you look at all these magazines that come out now. Like, they're good magazines, man. You get a hat or a T-shirt or whatever, but it's like, dude, you spend more than $30 a day on BS you don't need.
Oh yeah.
And that's for the year, and it's something you like to hunt, but you're the first one to complain about, how crowded something is because public land is well, put more money into the system so that they can buy more land. Yep. That more things can be conserved, by Ducks Unlimited. That's the goal with all these programs, is trying to get these things, so when people just start shooting their mouths off, it's like, what have you done?
Right.
Type of thing.
Yeah. They take a lot for granted. The North American wildlife model exists today because of the people that stepped up last century and really saved a lot of our species from the brink of extinction. And we need the next generation of people to step up and start, like you said, do something.
And I'll tell you,
start somewhere.
I'll tell you, it's scary because the little that I'm in academics, and I've talked to some people, some very big names in the deer community, and that are at big universities that are full-time that they teach these courses. Again, not all of it, but a very significant portion of the students that are going through these natural resource programs and stuff now are not hunters.
Right.
Now, listen, I'm going to be the first to say that doesn't necessarily matter.
Sure.
You can be a non-hunter. Maybe you grew up in a hunting family, but you have to be an individual that understands the role that hunting has in conservation. Because those are going to be the individuals that are making policies in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And that's where where the university that I'm at, when it came, we have this environmental science degree, right? And I'm teaching elective courses in there. And I was like, guys, why don't we have a permitting class? I'm like, I don't think you understand how important environmental permitting is. Like, that makes or breaks projects. I said, these guys that graduate with an environmental science degree, what do you think they're going to be doing? I mean, what do you think they're going to be doing with that degree? Right. They're going to be working as an environmental health and safety person. Guess what? Environmental permits for the corporation they're working for. They're going to work as a consultant like me. Guess what? They're going to be dealing with permits. I said, you guys have nothing on permits. And it's not just this university. A lot of universities don't have it. I do this course. It's booked. 10 minutes. It's booked out, for on there, and we go through permitting. Like, this is how, when they graduate, they can go in front of an employer like myself. And I say, talk to me about the NPDES program or the 404 program with the Army Corps or migratory bird with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Why is it important? What is it? How does it, relate to what we're doing? And if they can start doing that, that's the type of thing we need in the natural resource space. Yeah. When I teach wildlife conservation, we have the conversation. We have the non-hunters in there,
right?
Whether and
that's who we've got to reach more than ever.
And it's like, listen, when you start talking about, I love, I get kind of yelled at for this sometimes, but the Instagram page, like Nature is Metal, type of thing. I'm sure you're familiar with it. I'm like, you want to see what the real world's like? Let's watch this. And we'll watch a photo of someone harvesting a deer with a bow, and that thing goes 20 yards, 30 yards. Now let's look and compare and contrast the two deaths and which one was more ethical, for that animal. Anybody watched any animal documentary, look on Netflix, there's the series on predators, and you're so detached from how the real world works. Like, there's people that, you are just not going to reach, and in grad school, it's a pretty common saying. It's not like he developed it, but the saying is, science is under no obligation to make sense to you. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to understand it. You don't have to agree with it. But again, 2 + 2 is 4.
Right.
This animal is going to die a miserable death. It's either going to starve, it's going to die of disease, it's going to get hit by a car on a broken leg and get eaten alive. Most deaths in the animal kingdom are not pleasant.
Yeah.
A human harvesting an animal is the most ethical way, period. That the animal's going to die. Now, you can talk about factory farming and stuff like that, and all of that. That's a different subject. Right. But we talk about this with the students. I'm like, listen, now let's look at the population of small ground. So you're saying all life matters. Why doesn't that field mouse matter? Why do you not care about that field mouse, but you care about a whitetail? Mm-hmm. It's that simple. Yep. Let's look at the numbers of how many of those small ground-dwelling mammals die, as well as songbird nests, and other species that get chewed up from combines and stuff like that. Like, nothing, and this is the thing that we hit, with those courses, is that there is nothing that we do as humans that does not have a consequence for the environment.
Right.
Period. Everything has a cost. You have to give something to get something. Period.
No question.
End of story. Type of thing. So it's something that, when you talk about the education of the generation now and moving forward, is that it's important that we have these conversations with the students and have those uncomfortable conversations. Because a lot of their stuff is, labeled. It's headlines. It's grabbing attention. It's not based in any truth. A lot of it, it's just, you have false notions of how this actually works. Yeah. Look at large, what they call trophy hunting, overseas, like in Africa or whatever. It's like, listen, there's shitty people that are going to do bad things. There's going to be poachers. There's going to be black market. You're never going to get rid of that. But if you want to boycott, like there's a reason why an X amount of species is being advertised to be harvested.
Right.
Because biologists have looked at it and said, these are causing a problem. Whether it's a prey species causing, wide scale damage to the vegetative communities that are having large scale impacts. Hey, we've got to harvest these animals, right? Or if it's a predator that's causing an imbalance, and then you talk to people that are over there and how much that drives the economy. Well, if there's no money coming in, what do you think is going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to make money somehow, and then it's black market stuff. So it's having these conversations with these students to be like, listen, it's waterfowl. This is what we're talking about for this podcast. Here's this issue that we have with waterfowl, whether it's pintails. Pintail numbers, because of the education, are going up, but mallards are going down. Why? Well, everyone's trying to take this easy answer and fit it into a complex problem.
Sure.
And it's just not able to be done. You can't do it. You need the pockets of research from guys like Ben that are looking at these urban areas. You need Phil that's looking at this internationally with waterfowl. You need the small scale, what I'm doing, right? And all this stuff fits in like that. But you need to create that interest in the student body to want them to go out and get their hands dirty and be field biologists. Not everyone's going to be a doctor. Not everyone's going to work in pharmaceuticals. Like we need natural resource people. We need field people that have an understanding of the dynamics of the North American wildlife model and, what that means and why it's been so successful.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle, even with the general public. I mean, we've gotten to the point where feelings are starting to replace science, and just how detached everybody is becoming. The human race is so detached, like people don't even make the connection when they eat a hamburger to where that even came from anymore. It's insane to me, but it's where we're at, and we're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, it's astonishing, And I know you're a deer guy, but just give the analogy. It's like these urban deer populations where the municipalities opened up to hunting. And then you get this big crowd of people are like, no, I don't want to do it. I'm like, lady, I see you pulling in a Beamer or a Mercedes. Like you're going to smack a 150 or 200 pound deer doing 40 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be the first one calling the city manager. I want you're paying for my, you know what I'm saying? Like
exactly.
It's just such a disconnect.
Yeah.
Everybody really they want to be the social justice warrior for something they have no idea about.
Right.
They're just like, this comment on this Facebook post said this. Yeah, that makes sense. Right. I had a Facebook post the other day. There was a page that I follow. I didn't even know I followed it. It's just something I probably clicked on. And someone asked for a snake ID. And it was a fox snake. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I can't wait. This goes into ducks as well. I'll get into that. But it's like, you look at this like a milk snake. It's not a milk snake. I'm like, milk snake has this coloration that goes into the head. The fox snake has this kind of similar coloration, but it's darker on the head. Like zoom in on the photo like that. It's right there, right? People are like, it's a garter snake. I mean, I see people that post, photos of ducks. It's like this, and this is something that Phil does a lot, this is a true mallard black duck hybrid. Well, how do you know that? Mm-hmm. By looking at that bird, because it's got a little bit of green in its head and it's relatively dark, right? It's like, that doesn't mean, because Phil gets these. I text him all the time. I'll send him a photo that I see. I'm like, these guys are arguing. I think what this is an immature black duck, a juvenile drake that is showing ancestral traits, because almost all wild waterfowl evolved from the North American wild mallard. Mm-hmm. So it's like black ducks and mallards are very closely related. Right. When you talk to Phil, that's exactly what he finds is these ancestral traits that people misconstrued with hybridization, and thinking these things happen. But a lack of waterfowl ID, people got to get it together, man. Jeff talks about walking up and I forget what he said, but it was something as absurd as like, look at these widgeon that I shot. He's like, that's a hen black duck.
Yeah.
Like you're not even in the same ballpark,
No.
type of thing. It's like, and there's been studies on this where I think the actual waterfowl ID, like success is like 30%, 40%. And the scary part is that's a lot of that. There's been some, state agencies that have been caught up in those as well with their biologists, to where it's low there too, especially when it comes to these hybridizations or suspected hybridizations, type of thing. But that's where the genetics come in. I mean, genetics has been around for a while, but obviously it's 2024. The technology we have available, the amount of information we're able to get and better analyze genomes and sequences, and you talk to Phil, and he's putting together these models using AI to be able to take a photo of a duck, of a mallard, and that thing will spit you out. It's not ready yet, but spit out that bird has 20% game farm mallard based on these metrics.
Interesting.
So it's like it's an exciting time, to help these issues of conservation, but we need the involvement, with it. Like I'm getting ready to go down to Arizona with him again here in August, like I do every year, to work on the Mexican duck. Again, 2020, the Mexican duck gets put into as its own individual species, and we know nothing hardly about it ecologically. Like it's awesome to go down there and like look at this bird that we hardly know anything about ecologically. That's always been assumed to be a subspecies of the mallard, and now you find out. It has this asynchronous wing molt. It doesn't molt at the same time. And you start looking at all these different kind of cool things that you get your hands on. Like, who does not want to be involved in this? Like, it just, it just drives me nuts.
Well, Eric, I appreciate you being so generous with your time. I don't want to take up your whole night, but
I could talk about this all day.
Yeah, absolutely. We can go on for 3 hours. Is there anything else, research from your PhD you want to talk about, or anything else we didn't cover?
I mean, we're pretty, we have started very little of it because it's still new. We're getting ready here in the next month or so to start putting traps out and baiting and getting ready for our banding season and our sampling season to start getting our first round of preliminary data. With the permits and things that we have to apply for that, they didn't come in until a little bit too late. So we weren't able to capture live birds off the nests that we were being utilized. So next year will really kind of be the real start to the research data. But this year, collecting, banding birds, collecting data, we're collecting a lot of. So what we've been doing is off the nests is because we are, we have all the permits to go in there and handle the eggs and stuff like that because you need permits for that. But excuse me. The clutches that have hatched, we found a very high degree of intact membranes, which you see, and we can get genetic samples from that. So I'll be able to, have that and say, nest 4 had these six samples, and then next year, hopefully in that area, we catch a bird and run its signature, and like, oh. That was one of the birds from last year's hatch on this nest, So now, we can band that bird and we can start checking it and say, hey, man, this bird doesn't leave. It's here every year. It's coming back to this nest, right? So, and looking at it and saying, hey, this bird's coming back to the nest and it's got 30% game farm mallard, or it's got 2%, right? So it's just, again, adding those. So as the years go on, and even after the PhD, this is something that we'll still be active in doing and gathering the data. But, next year, being able to actually get the birds on the nest, catch them, tag them, sample them, catalog them, that's going to be the real start to the data. So this year, preliminary data, get some bands on birds. We're going to be putting some auxiliary bands besides the normal bands that people are used to. So I'm telling people now, they're like, oh, here we go. I get double banded birds. Like, yeah, we're going to have them out there. So don't shoot them.
Awesome.
If you see them. Right. But I'm not telling you what color they're going to be. But yeah, we're going to do auxiliary bands so that when we get hands on birds, those bands, we know from a visual aspect, just glassing an area, that's one of our birds, rather than having to get hands on it. So, the next year will be, next year or two is going to be the real interesting stuff where I'm going to be able to have some more concrete answers preliminarily to what we're seeing. This year, like I said, banding, sampling, and just looking at helping Phil and others doing research in this area get some more data on populations locally here, and looking at the genetics of what the population is, here in these regions. And then we'll extrapolate that, starting next year.
Yeah, super interesting. Looking forward to following along. I want to jump into some rapid fire questions for you, and then I'll give you a chance to
no problem,
let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
All right. What's your favorite waterfowl? Probably already know the answer to
off
this
the top
one.
of my head, I'm gonna say Drake Woody, but pintails are cool too. But I think the wood duck is such a beautiful bird. The Drake,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's your favorite waterfowl recipe?
I gotta tell you, I'm simple. I'm a guy. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So breasting them out, cutting them up, and I grill them like a steak. I have a pellet grill. I have a Traeger, so it's like putting it in there, 130, 135 degrees. My wife will make what they call the cowboy butter, the garlic butter dipping sauce or whatever, and I'll sear those things like a steak, season them, and cut them up and have them as a meal, depending how many I have, or dip them in that sauce with some vegetables or something, rice. It's simple. That's good. That's my go-to.
What's your favorite shotgun?
For waterfowl right now, my Winchester, I have an SX4, so semi-auto, been great. I've had one small hiccup. It didn't feed a shell. It was super cold outside, worked flawlessly the whole day, but I did have one where it didn't feed. I had to manually rack it, but other than that gun is, I've killed a lot of birds with that gun. I've even switched over to using that gun I used it for turkey, got my turkey this year, and I've been using it for upland game bird too. So I've got my over and unders, but that semi-auto is just, it's lights out. It's accurate, that for sure.
Excellent. What's your favorite snack in the duck blind?
I am not a big snacker. I don't usually carry a whole lot. I work out a lot. I do jiu-jitsu for 20 years. Like, I train a lot. My body's used to, I fast during the day. My body's used to not needing a whole lot, but I do still bring stuff. Generally what I bring is I'll have my water bottle with this isn't a plug or anything, but it's liquid IV or something like that with electrolytes and stuff like that I don't have to have anything. But I would say my favorite snack is probably some beef jerky. Just as a field biologist, like I always have, the sun's not going to melt it. It's very good in a backpack when I'm out there all day doing work for a wetland assessment or something like that. So it's a go-to that I grab is beef jerky. But I will say, if I'm out there and I got some time, got a cooler for whatever reason, good old Uncrustable isn't a bad thing.
There you go.
So I'm a sucker for those damn things.
Yeah. Do you prefer waterfowl hunting in lakes, marshes, or rivers?
I would probably say a marsh. I'm more comfortable in those wetland type of ecosystems. I think beneficially from an ecological side, they provide more sustenance and things for the birds in general. And I think you're probably going to have a higher concentration and a better harvest with those types of environments. I think lakes are a lot bigger and birds can fly out of range and you're not going to be as up close and personal. And rivers, depends where you are, how wide, how deep, is it frozen, what is it? So I would marshlands.
Absolutely. It's hard to beat a marsh. That's for sure.
Yeah. It sucks going in there and finding a spot that you can sit all morning and not get eaten alive by bugs, but I'm comfortable in that area. So,
and how many decoys do you use on an average hunt?
We take a lot out. I always bring at least a dozen of my Mallard decoys. Now, also, I'm hunting with 4 or 5 guys, so they're bringing a dozen or 2 as well. I generally bring a dozen Mallard, and I'll bring a dozen of whatever else. I'll bring a little mixture of black ducks. I'll bring a little mixture of just some variety, and they're nothing crazy, like a pintail or something like that. But it's usually heavy with mallard. I would say we probably put out at least 2 dozen, but it depends on where we are. If you're in a small river that's only maybe like 20, 30 yards wide, we're not putting that much out. So we might put, a dozen out, and then maybe some vibrators or, some movement decoy of some type, 1 or 2. But, not a whole lot. Where we hunt, we're not doing massive spreads. Now for geese, we put a lot out. But
Big
for our
difference.
ducks, there's definitely a big difference on our decoy usage between geese and waterfowl. Waterfowl, where we hunt, we get along just fine with about 2 dozen. And nothing really more than that.
Would you prefer to boat, kayak, or walk in?
Walk in. Yeah, I'm a walking guy. Again, I'm just comfortable in that environment. To me, it's, walking through the woods at night, at dark, getting in there early in the morning, listening to everything awake around you. I mean, I've hunted off boats too. It's fun. If you're going after divers and stuff like that, you really need to, that's still fun. But, it's like hunting. It's like hunting deer, man. Like you're sneaking in and, getting in under the cover of darkness. You're setting up, you're building out your blinds. You're making sure you're camoed in and everything's right. So I like, rather than having to go, like, I know the birds are always here, I want to bring them to me. Being able to call in birds at a static spot, that you've got set up, that's awesome.
Yeah, you said it right the first time and corrected yourself, but it's going in at night. People are like, "You going duck hunting in the morning?" I said, "I wish. I'll be going tonight."
Yeah.
Leaving at 2, 3 in the morning. It's
it's
dark.
Insane. I mean, people call it nighttime as a generality, but it's morning. Yeah, you're up early, but it's dark.
Yeah, absolutely.
And most places we drive are an hour and a half. Where we're going, so it's like you're up early.
No doubt. And what's your favorite place to waterfowl hunt? You don't have to give me a specific spot. It could be just a place you like to go or a place you've been.
I would say there's one of my best friends has a farm about 5 minutes from my house. About 100 acres, and he's not a hunter at all. Just has an old farmhouse he's had since he was 20 years old. He's been an entrepreneur his whole life, has money and just lived in this old farmhouse. He bought it at auction, and he's a simple guy, but he's got a lot of property and it gets leased out for farming. But the way that it is, the topography, there's a very massive area that floods. And it floods maybe like half a foot, 8, 10 inches at the most. Ducks pour, and it's usually corn. Ducks just fly in there like crazy. It's one of those spots that I don't hunt it a lot. I might hunt it maybe 2, maybe 3 times in a 2-week span or something like that. Just depends, but I'm not harvesting a lot of birds out of there. That's my go-to spot. I've shot a lot of wood ducks out of there. I've shot a lot of mallards out of there. I've shot a lot of geese out of there. That's one of those spots that I know I'm going to see birds when I go there.
Sounds like a great spot.
Yeah. And driving by it, you'd never know it. It's just something that I've had at his house all the time, and it floods, and it's our range where we shoot guns and stuff. And we'll be out there on scopes and glassing and looking, and you just see a bunch of ducks pile in, and you're like, you've got to be kidding me, type of thing. So yeah, I've taken a few of my buddies there. Yeah. I've taken a few of my buddies there,
Nice.
But yeah.
Well, Eric, I really appreciate it. Super interesting conversation. I'm going to have you back on, and
yeah, sure, man.
We're less than 100 miles apart, so I got to come help you band or come hang out with you someday.
Yeah, I'll let you know. I'll reach out to you,
and we'll catch up.
It's coming up. All right, Brian. No problem, buddy.
And let everybody know where they can find you. Let us know, how to follow your research or your podcast or whatever you want to.
Yeah. So the podcast is the HuntScience Podcast. You can find us anywhere. We do a video and an audio portion. I haven't put out an episode in a while just because of work and everything like that, but we're ramping that back up. We're filming episodes now. The newest one that's going to be released is Phil. I got with him. That's the podcast, HuntScience Podcast. We have a website. You can find us and communicate with us on there. If you are interested in getting a hold of me about any type of consulting work or anything like that, my company is called Lansource Consulting. So LANSOURCE, and I'll give Brian information to post that on there. But other than that, I'm on all social media platforms with the podcast or myself, Eric Lance. It's pretty easy to find my photo. It's usually me holding a duck or a fish or something, like that. So it's pretty easy to find. But yeah, I would say the podcast or the consulting company, those are the two emails that I check the most.
All right, Eric. Thank you very much.
No problem, Brian. Thanks, buddy.
Huge thank you again to Eric for taking time out of his day to join me on the show. And thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at migrationwaterfowl. We also have a Facebook group for the podcast. Please join us there as well. And if you could, please check out our YouTube channel and subscribe while you are there. Lots of great content coming that way throughout the rest of the year. Join us every Monday for a bonus Migration Monday video podcast. You can find links to our merchandise store on our Facebook and Instagram pages. Check out our shirts, hoodies, thermoses, coffee, and more over there. And now through the end of July, 10% of everything we sell will go to Delta Waterfowl. If you like what you've heard here, please take a moment and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Send me a message or email after you leave the review, and I will mail you a Migration Waterfowl podcast decal. So get out there and enjoy the outdoors, but make sure you seek out a relationship with the one who created everything. Matthew chapter 7, verses 7 and 8 says, "Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be opened." And remember, the migration is coming. Be ready when it arrives. Tune in next week to hear another great guest on the Migration Waterfowl podcast.